board will take public comments on the ISMND and then finally consider adoption of the ISMND as well as the MMRP, which is the Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Program, which is a document that contains all the mitigations that we found would be necessary to reduce all the environmental impacts to less than significant levels. So the purpose of CEQA, or the California Environmental Quality Act, is to identify and disclose potential environmental impacts. CEQA documents inform school boards, cities, counties, and the general public about potential environmental impacts that and consequences of approval of projects. CEQA requires that lead agencies, which in this case would be the board or the district, identify ways to mitigate or avoid project impacts. And impacts are direct physical changes in the environment and reasonably foreseeable indirect physical changes. CEQA documents are disclosure documents. The district is disclosing to the public, if we build this project, these are the types of environmental impacts that could occur if we don't provide mitigation measures. So the general CEQA process, this slide outlines the general CEQA process. So the district and the consultant team evaluated the environmental impacts associated with the project. Evaluation included traffic modeling, air and noise modeling. We have a whole bunch of specialists, which I show on another slide. We evaluated the impacts. This took several months, and the district then published the findings in their ISMND. It was circulated for 30 days and for public comment, and the public comment period closed last Thursday. And as I mentioned, the district received 2 letters on the ISMND. An important part of the CEQA process is public review, so that is why the document goes out for public review, and you hear public review again tonight. So the school board will need to consider both written comments as well as oral testimony on the ISMND, and then later on tonight we'll consider adoption of the ISMND and the MMRP. And with adoption, when you formally adopt the CEQA document, you are saying that we have adequately analyzed the potential environmental impacts and have mitigated them all. If you were to not adopt the document, you would be saying, we don't think that this document covers all the impacts, and we want to identify other potential areas you think that are not adequately evaluated. So this slide gives you a sense of how notice was distributed and how the document was distributed. The district published the notice of intent to adopt an ISMND in Oakland Tribune, as well as mailing to properties within 500 feet of the project site, posted the notice on and around the project site, and as I said, it's been mentioned in numerous district meetings, public meetings, as well as posting on various listservs. CEQA only requires that you notice according to one of these ways, but the district decides to notice as much as possible, so people are aware. Copies of the document were made available at the district office, City Hall, as well as on the district website and the City of Emeryville's website. So I just want to give you a sense of who was involved in preparation of this document. As I said, LSA was involved. LSA, our office is located in West Berkeley. I have 10 years experience working on CEQA documents. Judith has over 15 years of experience. CEQA documents, that is all that I work on for cities, counties, and school districts. We also had a number of technical experts, including traffic engineers, air quality, global climate change analysts, noise analysts, and environmental assessors to work on the potential hazards on the site, hydrologists, geotechnical analysts, visual simulations technicians, and I also realized I omitted one. We also had a cultural resources team evaluating potential cultural resources on the project site. So these are all the topics that are evaluated in an ISMND. There's 17 different topics. I'm not going to read through them all. If you see an S after it, that means we identified an impact, an environmental impact within that topical area, and that a mitigation measure was required. So I'll try to briefly just run through the impacts that we identified and briefly discuss some of the mitigation measures. I just want to note that mitigation measures were identified and incorporated into the project to reduce all the impacts that we identified to less than significant levels. So the first impact was an aesthetics impact related to field lighting, the new lighting on the field. And to mitigate that, we identified parameters for when field lighting could be used, as well as directing the district and to work with their lighting consultant to develop different lighting scenarios so that you don't have the bright lights when you don't need them, like if you're cleaning after an event or something like that. The second impact was related to construction, air quality impact. We didn't find our modeling didn't conclude that there was any impacts related to construction vehicle emissions or operational emissions, but the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, which is the air district for this area, requires that projects implement measures to reduce fugitive dust during construction. So we identified that mitigation measure. With biological resources, we identified potential water runoff impacts, as well as impacts related to tree removal that could impact nesting birds if they were on site, and identified some mitigation measures to address both water runoff and tree and vegetation removal. We did not identify any known cultural resources on the project site. However, you never know what you'll find when you start excavating. This is especially true in a community like Emeryville, where you have Native American history in the community. So we've identified potential archaeological and paleontological mitigation measures. For geology and soils, we identified impacts related to exposure to seismic shaking. Any project in the Bay Area is going to have this potential impact just because we're in a seismically active region. In addition, potential soil erosion and expansive soils. The mitigation measure to address this includes the district undertaking a design level geotechnical analysis prepared by a qualified individual that would be reviewed by the City of Emeryville, as well as the California Division of State Architect, and then implementing any additional mitigation measures or any additional measures that report concludes are necessary. With greenhouse gas emissions, we found that the emissions associated with the project would be less than significant, would not meet the EAQMD's standards of significance to be significant. However, we included measures so that the project would be more consistent with the city's climate action plan. For hazards and hazardous materials, we identified potential on-site hazards. This is not unusual for areas that have a prior history of development. You may have on-site hazards from previous uses of the site, and identified that the district should prepare a PEA, which is a preliminary endangerment assessment to identify and address hazards. This document is prepared with oversight from the Department of Toxic Substance Control. This is a document that when schools are rebuilding or acquiring new sites, that they go through this process with DTSC to make sure that all the hazards on site are taken care of. Hydrology and stormwater quality impacts. We identified potential stormwater quality impacts associated with construction, as well as operation of the site, and the district will be required to prepare stormwater management plans to address both of those scenarios. In addition, there was concern about how the project could potentially impact the foundation of the creek culvert. So there was some language in there about if there's buildings going within the foundational footprints of the creek culvert, that special steps need to be taken to make sure that the culvert is not damaged. For noise, we identified impacts related to the new PA system, as well as construction-related noise. And then with utilities and service systems, there was a question about adequate fire flow, just to ensure that there is adequate fire flow prior to occupation of the project site, as well as the impacts related to possible relocation of utilities that would need to occur on 3rd Street, potentially. So, as I said when I started the list, that all mitigation measures were identified and incorporated into the project to reduce all impacts to a less than significant level. So that sort of concludes the bulk of my PowerPoint presentation. The next steps would be to take and consider public comments on the ISM&D. I would just like to remind everybody that comments should be specific to the ISM&D or concerns about environmental impacts associated with the project and not about the proposed project's merits. Judith is going to come up to talk a little bit about the two letters that the district received, one from the city of Emeryville and then a group letter from community college.
Superintendent Mendoza said, I'm Jean Malamet. I'm the principal in charge of this project with LSA Associates. And I'll just give a brief overview of the, where's this one? Of the two letters, two comment letters that we received. So after the 30-day public comment period, we did in fact receive only two letters. They were received on the last day of the comment period, which was Thursday of last week, or the 11th. And we then mobilized our folks and all our specialists to respond to those letters and prepare the responses, which we finished up end of the day on Friday, and then they're in your packet today in terms of the letters that came in and also a memo which contains our responses. And I believe there were additional copies that were available at the back table of those response memos to the comments and suggested text changes associated with them. So the two letters that we received one from a group called Community Commenters. It was a letter with 28 individual comments in it. After review and consideration of that letter, we didn't find that there were any new or more severe impacts that were identified, that we hadn't already identified and mitigated in the ISNND, and that no new mitigation measures or alternatives that would substantially reduce any of the impacts were put forward or identified that would need to be adopted as part of this. So essentially, it was just a lot of it was clarification